Have you ever stopped to think about how many speakers are around you right now? In your cell phone, in your computer, in your television, in your car, in the headphones you use daily. Each of these devices carries within it a small piece of a global empire that moves $60 billion every year. A market so present in your life that it has become invisible, but whose economic power rivals entire industries in developed countries. The speaker industry is not just about music or entertainment. It's about communication, security, education, transportation, and practically every sector of the modern economy. From the alarm that wakes you up in the morning to the sound system in the cinema where you watch your favorite movies, speakers are everywhere. And each one represents a complex value chain involving dozens of companies, thousands of workers, and billions of dollars in commercial transactions. What makes this market truly fascinating is its strategic invisibility. While you pay attention to the latest smartphone, you rarely think about the 2 or 3 speakers embedded in it. While you admire the design of a luxury car, you ignore the 12 or 15 speakers strategically distributed inside. This invisibility is not accidental, it's intentional. The speaker industry learned decades ago that the best product is one you don't notice, but can't live without. The greatest fortunes in this sector were built not by those who make the most expensive speakers, but by those who manage to place their products in billions of devices around the world. Companies you've never heard of generate more revenue in a quarter than many famous brands do in an entire year. They operate in the shadows, supplying components to tech giants, automotive companies, and consumer electronics manufacturers. This is an empire built on tight margins and astronomical volumes, where cents of profit per unit turn into millions when multiplied by billions of units sold. An economic game where only the most efficient survive, and where innovation is not a luxury, but a matter of survival. Welcome to the hidden world of $60 billion in speakers, brought to you by FactoryMade. To understand how $60 billion circulate in this industry, you first need to comprehend that there isn't a single speaker market, but rather dozens of interconnected segments. The automotive speaker market alone moves about $15 billion annually. Speakers for smartphones and tablets represent another $20 billion. Professional audio systems, home theater, headphones, portable sound equipment. Each segment has its own rules, margins, and dominant giants. The cost structure in this market reveals a surprising reality. A speaker that costs $5 to manufacture can be sold for $20 to an electronics manufacturer, who then embeds it in a product sold for $500 to the end consumer. The value chain is long, and each link captures its share. Raw material suppliers, component manufacturers, assemblers, distributors, integrators, and brands all participate in the division of these $60 billion. What separates winners from losers in this market is not sound quality, but operational efficiency. A company that can reduce production costs by 10 cents per unit while maintaining the same quality can add tens of millions of dollars to its annual profit when producing billions of units. That's why the largest companies in the sector invest fortunes in automation, logistics, and process optimization. Every second saved on the production line represents millions in annual gains. The economic geography of this market is equally revealing. Asia accounts for about 70% of the world's speaker production, but only 30% of the value captured. Western companies that control brands, patents, and distribution channels take the largest slice of the pie, even if they produce little or nothing. An American company can generate $1 billion in speaker revenue without owning a single factory, while an Asian manufacturer produces millions of units and operates with margins of only 3 to 5%. This imbalance has created a fascinating dynamic. Asian manufacturers are gradually moving up the value chain, investing in their own brands and direct-to-consumer channels. Meanwhile, Western companies are increasingly outsourcing production, focusing on design, marketing, and patent control. The result is a silent redistribution of these $60 billion, with new players capturing ever larger slices of a constantly transforming market. You've probably never heard of AAC Technologies, but there's a good chance you're using a product with speakers manufactured by them right now. This Chinese company supplies acoustic components to practically all major smartphone manufacturers worldwide. On its own, it generates over $3 billion a year, producing billions of micro speakers that fit in the palm of your hand. Its profit margin may be modest, but its volume is so gigantic that it transforms it into one of the most lucrative companies in the sector. On the other side of the spectrum is Harman International, now part of Samsung, which dominates the premium automotive audio market. With brands like JBL, Harman Kardon, and Mark Levinson, it supplies sound systems to practically all luxury car manufacturers worldwide. Its business model is completely different. Low volume, very high added value. A premium sound system for a luxury car can cost over $5,000, with margins reaching 40%. Harman generates over $8 billion annually in this segment alone. But the true invisible giants are the specialized component suppliers. Companies like Japan's Foster Electric and Denmark's Timpani supply drivers, diaphragms, and magnetic components to hundreds of manufacturers around the world. They don't sell final products, but the critical components that determine sound quality. Their bargaining power is immense because they dominate patents and processes that took decades to develop. Together, these companies control about $20 billion of the total $60 billion market. Market concentration in this sector is impressive. The 10 largest companies control approximately 50% of the entire global market. This means that half of the $60 billion is in the hands of just 10 corporations. The rest is divided among hundreds of smaller companies that fight for scraps or specialize in extremely specific niches. This concentration gives the giants brutal negotiating power over suppliers and customers. What makes these giants truly powerful is not just their size, but their vertical integration. Many control everything from new material research to final distribution. They own critical patents, factories on multiple continents, cutting-edge research centers, and exclusive relationships with the world's largest buyers. Competing against them is not just difficult, it's almost impossible. And that's exactly why they continue to capture the largest share of these $60 billion year after year. The micro speaker segment, those tiny components inside smartphones, tablets, and laptops, is where the true financial volume is concentrated. It's estimated that over 5 billion micro speakers are produced annually, representing about $25 billion of the total market. Each unit costs between $2 and $8 to produce, depending on quality and specifications. Multiply that by billions, and you understand the scale of this business. The economics of this segment are brutal. Profit margins rarely exceed 8%, meaning survival depends on massive volumes and extreme operational efficiency. A manufacturer producing 100 million units per year needs an impeccable operation. Any defect above 0.5% can mean millions in losses. Any delay in delivery can result in contractual penalties that wipe out an entire quarter's profit. What makes this market particularly interesting is the speed of innovation. Every year, smartphones get thinner, which demands even smaller speakers, yet paradoxically, with better sound quality. Developing a micro speaker that fits into a 7mm thick device and still produces quality sound requires massive investments in research and development. Leading companies spend between 5 and 10% of their revenue on R&D, which represents hundreds of millions of dollars annually. The supply chain for this segment is globalized to the extreme. Neodymium magnets come from China, which controls 90% of the world's production of this critical material. High-performance membranes are produced in Japan using special polymers developed over decades. Final assembly primarily takes place in China, Vietnam, and Thailand, where specialized labor and logistical infrastructure allow for mass production with consistent quality. Bargaining power in this segment is in the hands of a few giant buyers. Apple, Samsung, Xiaomi, Oppo, and Vivo together purchase over 60% of all micro speakers produced worldwide. This gives them immense negotiating power. They can demand ever lower prices, ever tighter deadlines, and ever higher quality. Suppliers who cannot keep up simply disappear. It's a game of survival where only the strongest remain, capturing their share of the $25 billion in this segment. While the mass market operates with tight margins, The premium speaker segment is where margins truly explode. A pair of high-fidelity speakers can cost between $5,000 and $50,000, with margins frequently exceeding 60%. This segment represents only 5% of the total unit volume sold, but captures almost 15% of the total market value, about $9 billion annually. The economics of the premium market operate on a completely different logic. Here, the cost of production is almost irrelevant. What you are buying is not just a speaker, but status, exclusivity, and the promise of a transcendental sound experience. Brands like Bang & Olufsen, Bowers & Wilkins, and Wilson Audio have built empires based on this premise. Their products cost 10 to 20 times more to produce than mass-market speakers, but are sold for 100 times more. What sustains these extraordinary margins is a combination of craftsmanship, exotic materials, and sophisticated marketing. A premium speaker might use solid wood cabinets cured for years, drivers with beryllium or diamond diaphragms, and discrete electronic components hand-assembled. The production process can take weeks per unit, with each speaker being individually tested and tuned. But the actual cost of all this rarely exceeds 20% of the final selling price. The premium market also benefits from a completely different customer base. These are buyers for whom price is not a primary consideration. They want the best, the most exclusive, the most impressive, and they are willing to pay for it. A premium home theater system can cost over $100,000, and there are customers around the world who buy multiple systems for different residences. For these buyers, speakers are investments in quality of life and symbols of success. Distribution in this segment is also unique. There are no mass sales or large retailers. Everything happens through specialized dealers, exclusive showrooms, and personal relationships. A salesperson might spend hours with a single client, demonstrating products, adjusting systems, and creating a personalized buying experience. This high-touch approach justifies margins that would be impossible in the mass market. And that's exactly why, despite representing only 5% of the volume, this segment captures $9 billion of the total $60 billion market. The interior of a modern car has transformed into a mobile sound studio, and this transformation has created a $15 billion market in automotive speakers alone. We're not talking about the basic speakers that came standard 20 years ago. We're talking about sophisticated systems with 10, 15, 20, or even 30 strategically placed speakers, creating three-dimensional sound experiences that rival cinema halls. The economics of this segment are fascinating because it operates on two distinct layers. There's the OEM market, where speaker manufacturers sell directly to car manufacturers. This market represents about $10 billion annually and is dominated by a few giant players like Harman, Bose, and Panasonic. Margins here are moderate, between 15 and 25%, but volumes are massive and contracts are long-term, ensuring predictable revenue. The second layer is the aftermarket, where consumers replace or upgrade their car sound systems. This market moves $5 billion annually and operates with much higher margins, frequently above 40%. Brands like JBL, Pioneer, Alpine, and Rockford Fosgate dominate this space, selling everything from individual $50 speakers to complete systems costing $5,000 or more. What makes the automotive market particularly lucrative is the integration with increasingly sophisticated infotainment systems. A premium sound system is no longer just about speakers, but about digital signal processing, active noise cancellation, automatic equalization adjustment, and integration with voice assistants. This complexity increases perceived value and justifies premium prices. A sound system endorsed by a luxury brand like Burmester or Mark Levinson can add $5,000 to $10,000 to a vehicle's price. Automakers have discovered that premium sound systems are one of the most profitable options they can offer. The cost to them is relatively low, perhaps $1,000 to $2,000 for a top-tier system, but they can charge $5,000 to $10,000 to the end consumer. And consumers pay because sound has become an essential part of the driving experience. This dynamic has transformed automotive speakers into one of the most lucrative segments of the entire industry. capturing $15 billion of the total $60 billion market. If you think traditional speakers move a lot of money, prepare to learn about the headphone segment, which alone accounts for about $18 billion of the total market. This is a segment that has exploded in recent decades, driven by mobility, remote work, and the constant need to consume audio content on the go. From $5 headphones sold at gas stations to $1,000 models for audiophiles, this market has room for everyone. The economic structure of this segment is particularly interesting because it combines massive volume in the entry-level market with extraordinary margins at the top. Basic wired headphones cost less than $2 to produce and are sold for $5 to $10 with margins of 50 to 100%. Premium noise-canceling headphones, on the other hand, cost between $20 and $40 to produce but are sold for $200 to $400 with margins reaching 80%. The real game-changer in this market was the elimination of the audio jack in smartphones, forcing the migration to wireless headphones. This shift created a new market worth tens of billions of dollars practically overnight. Apple's AirPods alone generate over $12 billion in annual revenue, with estimated margins of 60%. This means that this single product captures about $7 billion in gross profit annually. Competition in this segment is fierce because entry barriers are relatively low in the mass market, but extremely high in the premium segment. Any company can manufacture basic headphones using generic components from China, but creating premium headphones with active noise cancellation, exceptional sound quality, seamless connectivity, and attractive design requires massive investments in R&D, patents, and software ecosystems. That's why few players dominate the top of the market. The distribution of value in this segment is also revealing. Of the total $18 billion, about $10 billion goes to premium wireless headphones, $6 billion to wired headphones of all categories, and $2 billion to professional and specialized headphones. Companies that can capture multiple segments simultaneously, like Sony, Bose, and Apple, are the true winners. They diversify risk, maximize economies of scale, and dominate both physical and digital shelves, capturing their share of the $18 billion in this segment. To truly understand how $60 billion circulate in the speaker industry, you need to look beyond the final manufacturers and examine the entire value chain. This chain begins in rare earth mines in China, passes through specialized refineries, component manufacturers, assemblers, distributors, and finally reaches the consumer. Each stage captures its share, and the total sum is much larger than the $60 billion we measure only at the manufacturing level. Let's start with materials. Neodymium magnets used in practically all modern speakers represent a market of approximately $3 billion annually. China controls over 80% of this market, which gives it immense geopolitical power. Any restriction on the export of this critical material can paralyze the global speaker industry in weeks. This control over a critical resource is one reason why speaker manufacturing remains concentrated in Asia. Electronic components represent another massive layer of value. Amplifiers, digital signal processors, Bluetooth connectivity chips, each of these components has its own supply chain and its own specialized suppliers. Companies like Texas Instruments, Qualcomm, and Cirrus Logic supply the chips that power modern speakers, capturing billions of dollars in annual revenue. These components can represent between 20 and 40% of a speaker's total cost. Final assembly, while the most visible part, captures a relatively small portion of the total value. A worker on an assembly line in China can earn between $500 and $1,000 a month, assembling thousands of speakers. The assembly factory's margin rarely exceeds 5 to 10% of the selling price. The true value is captured by patent holders, designers, and brand owners who may be thousands of miles away from physical production. Distribution and retail capture the last large slice of the pie. A speaker that leaves the factory for $20 can be sold to retail for $40 and reach the consumer for $80 or $100. Retailers like Amazon, Best Buy, and large electronics chains capture margins of 30 to 50%. When you add up all these layers, raw materials, components, assembly, logistics, distribution, and retail, the total economic value generated by the speaker industry easily exceeds $100 billion annually. The $60 billion we measure is just the tip of the iceberg. Innovation in the speaker industry is not driven by a passion for music or the pursuit of sonic perfection. It is driven by a brutal economic reality: innovate or die. Companies that fail to launch new and better products each year quickly lose market share. And in a $60 billion market, every percentage point of share represents $600 million in revenue. Investments in research and development in this sector are astronomical. The 10 largest companies collectively spend over $4 billion annually on R&D. These resources go towards developing new materials for diaphragms, more efficient magnetic motor designs, digital signal processing algorithms, noise cancellation technologies, and integration with artificial intelligence. Each incremental advance can mean a competitive advantage worth billions. What makes innovation particularly valuable in this sector is that it allows for capturing premium margins, even if temporarily. When Bose launched the first truly effective active noise-canceling headphones, it could command premium prices for years until competitors caught up. When Apple seamlessly integrated AirPods into the iOS ecosystem, it created an advantage worth billions in annual revenue. These innovations are not just technical, they are economic. Patents are the currency of exchange in this market. Leading companies hold thousands of patents covering all aspects of speaker design and manufacturing. These patents are not just defensive, they are offensive. They allow for licensing technology to competitors, generating passive revenue of hundreds of millions of dollars annually. They also create entry barriers that protect the margins of market leaders against new entrants. But the most important innovation is not technical, it's in the business model. The shift from products to services, from one-time sales to recurring revenue, from hardware to integrated ecosystems. Companies that can make this transition capture not just the initial sale of the speaker, but an ongoing relationship with the customer that generates revenue for years. This is the true innovation that is reshaping how the $60 billion are distributed in the industry. If you map where the $60 billion of the speaker industry are generated and where they are captured, you will see one of the greatest asymmetries in the global economy. Asia, primarily China, Vietnam, Thailand, and South Korea, produces approximately 80% of all speakers manufactured worldwide. But it captures only about 35% of the total value, approximately $21 billion. The United States and Europe, on the other hand, produce less than 15% of the physical volume, but capture about 40% of the value, approximately $24 billion. This value capture happens through the control of brands, patents, distribution channels, and primarily through retail margins. An American company may not manufacture a single speaker, but it captures most of the profit by controlling the brand and the sales channel. This economic geography has created fascinating financial flows. Billions of dollars flow from Asia to the West in the form of payments for manufactured products. But billions flow back in the form of patent royalties, brand licensing fees, and payments for design and engineering services. The net result clearly favors the West, which captures much higher margins despite producing much less. But this dynamic is changing. Asian companies are heavily investing in their own brands, direct-to-consumer channels, and intellectual property. Chinese brands like Xiaomi, Oppo, and Anker are rapidly gaining global market share. They combine low production costs with direct access to consumers through digital platforms, eliminating intermediaries and capturing margins that previously went to Western distributors and retailers. The future of the geography of money in this industry will likely see a significant redistribution. Asia will not only produce the majority of speakers, but will also capture an increasingly larger share of the value. Western companies that fail to maintain advantages in innovation, brand, or customer experience will see their margins compressed. This is a tectonic shift that is reshaping how the $60 billion are distributed globally, and its implications extend far beyond the speaker industry. The biggest economic transformation in the speaker industry is not technological, it's strategic. Leading companies have realized that the true value is not in selling isolated speakers. but in creating integrated ecosystems where speakers are just an entry point for lucrative long-term relationships. This shift in mindset is reshaping how billions of dollars are captured. The most obvious example is Apple. AirPods are not just headphones. They are a gateway to the iOS ecosystem. Once you buy AirPods, you are more likely to buy an iPhone, an iPad, an Apple Watch. You subscribe to Apple Music, iCloud, other services. The lifetime value of a customer who enters through AirPods can easily exceed $5,000 over several years. AirPods are the hook. The ecosystem is where the true value is captured. Sonos built an entire business model based on this principle. Its speakers are not isolated products, but components of an integrated home audio system. You start with one speaker, then add another for the bedroom, another for the kitchen, a sound bar for the TV. Before you know it, you've invested $3,000 or $4,000 in a Sonos ecosystem. And once you're in, the cost of switching to another platform is so high that you'll likely remain a customer for decades. Amazon has transformed speakers into Trojan horses for its services. The Echo is not a profitable product on its own. Amazon likely sells each unit at a minimal margin or even at a loss. But every Echo sold is an access point for Amazon Prime, for voice shopping, for streaming services. The value lies in the long-term relationship, not in the single sale. This strategy has allowed Amazon to sell over 100 million Echo devices, creating a customer base that generates billions in recurring revenue. This shift to ecosystems is concentrating the market even further. Small companies selling isolated speakers are being squeezed. They cannot compete with giants that use speakers as loss leaders to capture customers in lucrative ecosystems. The result is that an increasing share of the $60 billion is going to a few players who control ecosystems, while the rest struggle for survival in a commodity market with ever-shrinking margins. Looking at the future of the speaker industry is looking at the future of how value is created and captured in the digital economy. This is no longer a market about hardware. It's a market about experiences, data, and relationships. Today's $60 billion could easily turn into $100 billion in a decade, but the distribution of that value will be radically different. The first major trend is integration with artificial intelligence. Speakers are becoming interfaces for voice assistants that control entire homes, make purchases, answer questions, and learn preferences. The value is not in the speaker, but in the data it collects and the services it enables. Companies that control these AI platforms will capture a disproportionate share of future value. We are talking about tens of billions in service revenue built on a foundation of billions of connected speakers. The second trend is mass personalization. Advanced manufacturing technologies are making it possible to create customized speakers for specific needs without the prohibitive costs of artisanal production. Imagine speakers acoustically optimized for the exact shape of your room, or headphones precisely adjusted for the shape of your ear. This personalization allows for capturing premium margins at scale, combining the best of both mass and premium worlds. The third trend is sustainability as an economic differentiator. Consumers, especially younger generations, are increasingly willing to pay a premium for sustainable products. Speakers made from recycled materials, modular designs that allow for easy repairs, trade-in programs that capture residual value. These are not just environmental initiatives, they are economic strategies that can add billions in captured value. But the most profound change will be in the very definition of a speaker. As technologies like directional audio, holographic sound fields, and brain-computer interfaces mature, the traditional concept of a speaker may become obsolete. The market of the future may not be about devices that emit sound, but about auditory experiences created through technologies we can barely imagine today. Today's $60 billion is just the beginning of a transformation that will redefine how we experience sound and how value is created in this process. $60 billion. This is the value that circulates annually in an industry you use every day but rarely notice. From the micro speaker in your smartphone to the premium sound system in a luxury car, from the headphones you wear at the gym to the professional speakers in stadiums and cinemas. Each represents a complex value chain, a story of innovation, competition, and value capture. This industry reveals fundamental truths about the modern economy. That value is not necessarily where production happens. That margins matter more than volumes when you control brands and patents. That ecosystems capture more value than isolated products. That innovation is not optional. It is the only way to survive. The $60 billion are not just a number. They represent millions of jobs, billions of units produced, trillions of hours of music listened to, communication facilitated. They are fortunes built and lost, companies that dominated and others that disappeared. They are the invisible story of how the technology you carry in your pocket came to you. And this story is far from over. Every technological advance, every change in consumer behavior, every new application of sound creates opportunities to capture value in new ways. The next 60 billion will be different from the last. More integrated, smarter, more personalized. But one thing will remain constant. Sound will continue to be an essential part of the human experience, and those who can deliver this experience superiorly will continue to capture billions.